The computer is such an important component of modern life that it is hard to imagine the world without it. Before the computer, the first devices used by primitive people for counting were sticks, consisted of numbers entered in dials, but it could only add. It added numbers entered with dials and was made to help his father, a tax collector. The basic principle of his calculator is still used today in water meters and modern-day odometers. Although it did offer a substantial improvement over manual calculations, only Pascal himself could repair the device, and it cost more than the people it replaced at work. However, in 1671, networks, which eventually led to the development of the Internet. Fourth-generation computers also saw the development of GUIs, the mouse, and handheld devices. Fifth-generation computers. Fifth-generation computing devices based on artificial intelligence are still in development, though there are some applications, such as voice recognition, that are being used today. The use of general entertainment.
Let us first start with a simple introduction to the computer hardware. The computer system basically
is the main circuit board that connects all components, allowing communication between the CPU, RAM, storage, and peripherals, which are other devices such as, sound card, network card, and that type of thing. All right, so we could see in the picture here that we have a motherboard, and these are the connections on the back that you will see in the back of the case. USB ports, network ports, video ports, and so on. And then we have our CPU slot here. So this might vary a little depending on what brand of CPU you are using. Then we have some RAM slots here, and it looks like we have some here. They're kind of hidden. And then we have our slots for our peripherals, such as the video card and sound card, like I mentioned. So these are most likely going to be PCI or PCIe slots. And then we have other miscellaneous connections like the power connection here, and then we'll have some connections for the USB controller that connects to the front and the rear of the computer for your USB ports. And then you'll also find some SATA connections for your drives and so on. All right, so now we'll talk about the CPU, Central Processing Unit, or processor as it's also known. So this is the brain of the computer that performs instructions and processes data for all tasks. So in this example here, we have an Intel i7. So here's the top, here's the bottom. So these are actually pins sticking out. You can't really tell from the picture. They will actually get placed into here, and then it'll be clamped down to secure it to the motherboard. And then over to the right here, we have a heat sink with a fan. So this heat sink sits on top of the processor. Then you'll have some thermal paste in between to help out with cooling. And then the fan blows down on it to keep it cool. And then this power connection will connect into the motherboard to provide power. And of course, there are AMD processors as well, and there are varieties of different types of processors for both brands. And of course, there are other types of processors as well, but the AMD and the Intel are the most commonly used. All right, so now we have RAM, random access memory, not to be confused with the memory storage on your hard drive. A lot of people get that confused. So this is temporary memory that stores data for quick access while the computer is running, helping programs and tasks run faster. So every time you open a file or a program, it'll be opened in your RAM memory. And then when you close the program or file, it gets released from the memory. But one thing you may notice is that when you open a bunch of programs or files, you may start to run low on RAM. And then even if you close them, it may not free up as much as you'd like. And in that case, you could just do a quick reboot and that'll flush out the RAM and you'll be starting fresh. So it's always a good idea to reboot your computer, at least maybe once a week if you like to leave it on all the time. And there are also third-party apps that could actually clear out memory for you. So we did a video on one of them. So you might want to check that out. And then one thing you'll notice here is this RAM chip, or DIMM as it's also known. You can see it's exposed with the microchips showing. Then you can see here on the label, if you could read it, it says it's DDR5 memory. So this memory is the same, it just has a plastic cover on it. So you can see it still has the same connection down here, which goes into the slot on the motherboard. We go back here, right here, and you can see it's notched as well, so it only goes in one way. All right, let's move on. All right, hard drives. So these are storage devices that hold the operating system, programs, and user data. So you install, let's say, Windows, for example, on the hard drive. You install your programs on the hard drive, and your files are kept on the hard drive. So over here on the left, we have a spinning disk hard drive with the platters inside of it. So this is exposed. You won't see it like this. It'll have a cover on it. So these spin at a high rate of speed, 5,400, 7,200 revolutions per minute. And then this head here reads and writes the data to these platters at a very high rate of speed. And then in the back you have your connections for the motherboard and for power. So this is a SATA drive, for example. You can see the SATA connections here. And then over here on the right we have how it really looks with the cover on it, like so. And then on top of this we have a SSD drive, solid state drive. So this is a flash drive. It doesn't have any spinning parts. So therefore it'll be faster and no spinning parts to break, but it doesn't mean it's bulletproof though. These could still fail as well. And these often use SATA connections just like the spinning disks, and they're going to be a little more expensive for the same capacity. Then on top of that we have an NVMe drive. So this might look like a stick of RAM, but it's actually a hard drive. And this end here goes into a specific slot on your motherboard, so your motherboard has to support it to use it. So this is an M.2 configuration. So this is 512 gigabytes, so these will be even more expensive. And you will not be able to get them in as large of a capacity as you will with the spinning disk. These could get 8, 10, 12, terabytes or whatever. Whereas this is only a 512 gigabyte, this is a 2 terabyte right here. Now we have video cards, or GPU. So video cards, they handle the rendering of images, video, and 3D graphics. It is essential for gaming, graphic design, and video editing. So most motherboards will have built-in video. So if you're not doing anything like playing intense games or photo or video editing, it should be fine. But if you are a gamer or serious video editor, then you probably want to have a standalone card like this. And you can see the connection here, which will go into one of these slots right here, and then it'll be sticking out the back here where you could plug in your monitor. Alright, so this particular video card has 4 different ports on it. It has an HDMI, 2 display ports, and a USB-C. So here we have a closer look at what they look like: USB-C, DisplayPort, HDMI, and then these two, DVI and VGA, these are typically found on older video cards or older motherboards. So you'll still see them, but not as often. Seems like HDMI is probably the most common right now. And of course your monitor has to have the same type of connection to be able to connect to it. You can do adapters for some of these, like a DVI to VGA or VGA to DVI if you need to do something like that. Alright, now we have the power supply, or PSU. So this converts electricity from an outlet into usable power for the computer's components. So when buying a power supply for building your own computer, you have to take into account what kind of other hardware you're going to have in there, such as a high-end video card, for example. You're going to need a better power supply to go along with it. When you buy a pre-built computer, they usually do a pretty good job of matching the power supply with the components. But then again, if you're going to be upgrading your pre-built computer, you might have to upgrade your power supply. So this will have various connections to plug into the motherboard, into your drives, and so on. So this connection here is what we saw right here. And then even on the video card, on the top here, you'll have a separate power connection specifically for the video card, to run the fans and all that. Alright, then we have network interface cards, or NICs as they're also known. Alright, right here we have an internal card. So this will connect to the motherboard in this slot here, and then I'll have an Ethernet port with some link lights to tell you the status of the connection. You could get them with multiple ports too if you want, but this is just a simple single port one. And then here we have an internal wireless card. So this will connect to the motherboard, and these antennas will be sticking out the back of the computer for your wireless connection. You don't see these too often, but they are still out there. So if you do not have wireless capabilities in your computer, then the best bet is to go with one of these USB wireless adapters. You could just plug it into any USB port, and they actually give you some pretty good speed, and you could probably get them for $25, so they're pretty cheap as well. And then finally we have this internal wireless card here. So if you have like a desktop computer that has built-in wireless, it most likely has one of these that connects to a special slot on the motherboard. And then these could also be replaced if they go bad. All right, and now we have a picture of a computer built with the cover off the case. So here's the motherboard. You can see this is a small motherboard because there is a lot of room for a larger motherboard. So if you needed some additional slots for other components, you could do a larger motherboard. And then we have the power supply here with the cables connecting to the motherboard. And then we have a hard drive here with the power connections. And then we have some room up here for additional drives or maybe a CD or DVD drive as well. And of course you have your cooling fans. This one looks like it just has one. There's actually one there too as well. So of course cooling is very important, especially if you're running a high-end video card. You need to make sure you have good cooling. And I also wanted to mention, when building your own computer, you need to make sure the CPU and the RAM will work with your motherboard. You know, there are specific specs for the RAM, like DDR4, DDR5, the speed, and so on. And then same for the processor. It has to support that specific processor. Most motherboards will support, various processors. So you're usually okay. And then for RAM too, it's not that hard to find one that'll work with it. All right, so there is your basic overview of common PC hardware. So hopefully it made sense, and hopefully you have a little better understanding of how it all works. All right, thanks for watching, and be sure to subscribe.
Types of hardware. Computer hardware is the physical parts of the computer system. Computer hardware is divided into internal hardware and external hardware. Internal hardware. Internal hardware are hardware found inside the system unit. Motherboard is the central circuit board, found inside the system unit. All other hardware are plugged into the motherboard. They are central processing unit. The CPU is the brain of the computer. It is responsible for all data processing. CPU is placed in the CPU socket on the motherboard. Internal memory. Random access memory and read-only memory are the internal memory used to store computer data. RAM is fixed in the slot present on the motherboard. ROM is also pinned on the motherboard. Power supply. Power supply sends power through cables to the motherboard and other components. Graphics card. Graphics card is plugged into the motherboard, and makes the computer to display images on the monitor. Fan. Fan acts as a heat sink. It keeps the CPU cool and stops from overheating. Sound card. Sound card enables the computer to produce sound. It also helps us to connect the microphone to the computer system. Expansion slot. An expansion slot is the slots on a motherboard. It can hold an expansion card like a video card, network card, or sound card to expand the computer's functionality. Drives. Hard disk drive, floppy disk drive, optical disk drive are connected to the motherboard. External hardware. External hardware are hardware found outside the system unit, and they are connected to the system unit. They are input devices, output devices and storage devices. External hardware components are called peripherals. Input devices. Input devices are used to enter data and instruction into the computer. Examples of input devices are keyboard, mouse, scanner, light pen, joystick, webcam, microphone, etc. Output devices. Output devices receives the information from the computer and gives it to the user in a human-readable form like text, audio, and video. Example of output devices are monitor, printer, speaker, headphone, projector, etc. Storage devices. Storage devices are used to store data. Examples are optical disc, floppy disk, hard disk, USB flash drive, memory card. Question time. Match the following types of software. Computer software is a set of instruction that guides the computer hardware, and tell the hardware what to do, when to do, and how to do a task. Software gives life to the computer. Without software, the computer is a dead machine. Computer software is divided into application software and system software. Application software. Application software are programs that help the user perform specific tasks. Word processing software like MS Word, WordPad, and Notepad are used to create documents such as letters, reports, etc. Database software like Oracle, MS Access are to store data and perform some operations on the data. Spreadsheet software like Microsoft Excel are used to organize data in rows and columns, perform calculations, and present data in charts and graphs. Presentation software like Microsoft PowerPoint is used to display information in the form of slides. Internet browsers like Google Chrome, Firefox, and Safari are used to access the Internet. System software. System software is a set of program that controls the computer hardware. The system software is the platform for running the application software. System software are operating system and utility software. Operating system. Operating system is a software that acts as an interface between the user and the computer system. Operating systems for desktop and laptop computer are Microsoft Windows, Linux, Mac OS. Microsoft Windows is a very popular operating system created by Microsoft. The founder of Microsoft is Bill Gates. There are different versions of Microsoft Windows. Mac OS is an operating system created by Apple. The founder of Apple is Steve Jobs, and Steve Wozniak. Mac OS can run on all Macintosh computers. Linux is a free operating system that can be downloaded from the internet. It was developed by Linus Torvalds. Operating systems for mobile devices are Android and Apple iOS. Android is the most common mobile operating system used for mobile phone and tablets. iOS is used on iPhone and iPad. Utility software. Utility software is a software used to analyze, configure, optimize and maintain the computer. Example of utility software are antivirus software, backup software, disk compression tool, file manager. Now, let's see the summary of what we have learned. Computer software is a set of instruction that guides the computer hardware. Computer software is divided into application software and system software. Application software are programs that help the user perform specific tasks. System software is a set of program that controls the computer hardware. System software provides the platform for running the application software. System software are divided into operating system software and utility software. Question time.